Imagine being invisible at your workplace for 3 years, while secretly mastering 9 languages, and having the voice of an angel. That's exactly what happened to Emma Carter. By day, she scrubbed floors at a tech company. By night, she performed at a hidden cafe, singing in Dutch, French, Spanish, Japanese, Hindi languages most people can't even pronounce. But when the CEO accidentally heard her singing his mother's lullaby in perfect Dutch, everything changed. He was moved to tears, not knowing the voice belonged to his own janitor. Then jealousy struck. A coworker framed Emma for theft, and she was publicly humiliated in front of the entire company. But what happened next shocked everyone, and turned the invisible janitor into the most celebrated person in the building. You won't believe how this story ends. Emma Carter pushed her well-worn cleaning cart down the long, gleaming corridor of Hayes Tech headquarters. The scent of industrial cleaner and expensive air freshener filled her nostrils, a familiar perfume of her daily life. 26 years old, and for 3 of them, these polished floors and silent glass offices had been her domain. She was a shadow in a world of bright lights and ambition, mostly unseen, mostly unheard. Her light brown skin, a gentle blend of her mixed heritage, and her practical, no-nonsense work uniform ensured she rarely drew a second glance. She often felt like a piece of the furniture, there but not truly seen. Sometimes, when she was cleaning an empty boardroom late at night, she'd trace the outline of the massive oak table, wondering about the important decisions made there, the powerful people who occupied those chairs. This morning, the familiar ache of being overlooked sharpened into a sting. Victoria, the head receptionist, impeccably dressed and radiating an air of self-importance, stood near the main elevator bank with her usual clique of administrative staff. Their laughter, always a little too loud, a little too exclusive, echoed in the expansive lobby. As Emma navigated her cart past them, careful not to interrupt their orbit, Victoria's voice, as smooth and cold as marble, sliced through the air. "Oh, look everyone, it's Emma. Still dedicated to those floors, I see. It's almost noble in a way." A ripple of condescending giggles followed. "Some people are just meant for certain stations in life, wouldn't you agree?" Emma kept her gaze fixed on the scuff mark she was heading towards, her cheeks burning. She could feel their eyes on her back. "You'll always be cleaning floors," Victoria had once hissed at her during a company party Emma had been working, the words like tiny shards of glass. Deep within Emma, shielded from the daily paper cuts of her work life, was a secret garden of dreams. At its center was Daniel Hayes, the CEO, early 30s with a mind that had revolutionized tech, but with eyes that sometimes held a distant, wistful look Emma recognized. She knew from a dog-eared magazine article she kept hidden in her locker that he had once been a singer, a prodigious talent. His mother, who had passed away some years ago, had cherished his voice and dreamed of him sharing it with the world. He'd abandoned that dream after her death, pouring all his energy into building his empire. Emma, an orphan herself with no family to speak of, felt a profound, albeit silent, empathy for his unspoken grief and his lost passion. Her infatuation was less about his power and more about the artist she sensed beneath the CEO exterior. Her own solace, her own stage, was a small, dimly lit cafe tucked away on a side street, named Le Chanson. There, several nights a week, Emma Carter transformed. The shy janitor faded and a confident, soulful singer emerged. Gifted with perfect pitch and a remarkable ear for languages, she could weave magic with her voice in 9 different tongues: Dutch, French, German, Italian, Spanish, Russian, Japanese, Hindi, and of course English. The cafe's small, appreciative audience knew nothing of her day job. They only knew the girl with the golden voice. But at Hayes Tech, her love for melody sometimes slipped out. While tidying the break room, she might hum a bar from a Russian folk song or a soft Japanese lullaby. This often drew thinly veiled disdain. "She's just the cleaner, why is she humming like that, so foreign?" One marketing executive had remarked loudly to a colleague, not bothering to lower her voice. Another time, an intern had openly laughed. "What's that weird sound? Is that even a real song?" Emma would quiet down immediately, the joy dimming in her eyes. Her life was a quiet one. Her tiny apartment, neat and sparsely furnished, was her sanctuary. Her books on language and her worn sheet music were her most treasured possessions. Loneliness was a frequent companion, but it was a familiar one. Her singing, her languages, and her silent, impossible crush on Daniel Hayes were the threads that wove color into her otherwise muted existence. She often looked at her reflection in the spotless windows she cleaned. A young woman with kind, intelligent eyes, A face that could be beautiful if she ever bothered with makeup or fancy clothes. But at Hayes Tech, she was just Emma, the janitor. She held onto a dreamer's spirit, a quiet, persistent hope that one day, someone might see beyond the uniform. If you're moved by tales of underdogs who dare to dream and find their true voice against the odds, make sure you subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories just like Emma's. We believe everyone has a song to sing, and we've got plenty more stories of courage and transformation coming your way. The chill of the late autumn evening mirrored the cold ache in Daniel Hayes' heart. It was the anniversary of his mother's death, a day that always left him adrift in a sea of sorrow and regret. The grand, empty rooms of his penthouse apartment felt more like a mausoleum than a home tonight. He needed to escape, to breathe air that wasn't thick with memories. He walked aimlessly through the city streets, the vibrant nightlife a stark contrast to his somber mood. A faint melody, delicate and melancholic, drifted out from a small, unassuming cafe named Le Chanson. Intrigued, or perhaps just seeking a moment's respite, Daniel pushed open the door and slipped inside. The cafe was warm, intimate, bathed in the soft glow of table lamps. He found an unoccupied table in a shadowy corner, grateful for the anonymity. Then he truly heard her. A woman was singing, her voice clear as a bell, yet imbued with a profound sadness that resonated deep within him. The language was Dutch, and the song, it was the lullaby. His mother's favorite. The one she used to sing to him every night, her hand gently stroking his hair, her voice a comforting balm to all his childhood fears. Slap kinge slap, the voice sang, pure and true. Memories, vivid and potent, surged through him. His mother smiled, the scent of her perfume, the unwavering love in her eyes. He saw her face, beaming with pride, the day he won his first school singing competition. He remembered her saying, "Your voice is a gift from God, Daniel. Never silence it." A wave of grief, so intense it almost buckled him, washed over him. Tears pricked his eyes, blurring the soft lights of the cafe. One escaped, then another, tracing hot paths down his cheeks. He didn't bother to wipe them away. He was completely shaken, the carefully constructed walls around his heart crumbling with each note. There was an almost unbearable beauty in the moment, a bittersweet comfort in hearing that beloved song sung with such exquisite tenderness. It was as if his mother's spirit was right there in the room, reaching out to him through the singer's voice. The song neared its end. Daniel leaned forward, a desperate need rising in him to see the face of the woman who had unknowingly touched the deepest part of his soul. Who was she? How did she know this song, sing it with such understanding? But the stage was cleverly arranged. The singer was partially obscured by a rich velvet curtain, and the strategic stage lighting cast her mostly in silhouette, a graceful, ethereal figure whose features remained a mystery. As the final note faded, followed by a wave of appreciative, gentle applause, Daniel felt a compelling urge to go to her, to thank her. But then a fresh wave of emotion, grief, vulnerability, the rawness of it all, overwhelmed him. He wasn't ready to share this, not with a stranger, not yet. He needed air, solitude. Abruptly, he stood up, fumbled some money onto the table, and hurried out of the cafe, the ghost of the lullaby clinging to him. From her hidden spot behind the curtain, Emma had just finished her set, her heart still humming with the emotion of the Dutch lullaby, a song she loved for its simple beauty. She allowed herself a small peek through the gap in the curtains, scanning the small audience. Her eyes caught a figure at a table in the back, a man who had seemed particularly captivated. As he stood and turned to leave, the dim light from the doorway illuminated his profile for a fleeting second. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Her heart did a painful, hopeful somersault. It was him, Daniel Hayes. Her Daniel. Here in this little cafe, listening to her sing. A dizzying wave of joy washed over her, quickly followed by a pang of anxiety. He was leaving. Had he liked it? Did he even realize it was her? Of course not. How could he? To him, if he'd noticed her at all, she was just an anonymous voice in a dimly lit room. The initial thrill dissolved into a familiar, crushing disappointment. He hadn't seen her. He hadn't recognized her. She watched his silhouette disappear into the night, her own song of hope dying on her lips. Several days passed. The memory of the Dutch lullaby and the mysterious singer at Le Chanson lingered in Daniel's mind like a haunting refrain. He found himself humming the tune unconsciously during meetings, a wistful expression on his face that didn't go unnoticed by his senior executives. He even considered going back to the cafe, but something held him back, a reluctance to disturb the sanctity of that fragile, emotional moment. Late one afternoon, Daniel was walking through a rarely used service corridor on the executive floor, his mind preoccupied with a complex algorithm for a new software project. It was a quiet part of the building, mostly used by maintenance and cleaning staff. Suddenly, a faint sound pierced through his thoughts, almost too soft to register. He paused, listening intently. It was a melody, hummed with a delicate, almost breathy quality. And it was unmistakably the same tune. The Dutch lullaby. His heart gave a jolt. He froze, every sense alert. Could it be? Here? He followed the sound, his footsteps surprisingly quiet on the linoleum floor. It led him towards a small utility alcove, usually filled with cleaning supplies and spare equipment. Peeking around the corner, he stopped dead. There, meticulously wiping down a metal shelf with a worn cloth, was Emma Carter, the janitor. She was humming softly to herself, her movements gentle and rhythmic, completely absorbed in her task and her quiet song. Daniel stared, a profound sense of disbelief washing over him. The voice from the cafe, this unassuming woman who polished the floors and emptied the trash bins, could they truly be one and the same? He must have made a small sound, or perhaps she sensed his presence, because she suddenly looked up, her eyes, large and surprisingly expressive, widening in startled surprise when she saw him standing there. "Mr. Hayes," she stammered, instinctively straightening up, a blush rising on her cheeks. She quickly dropped her gaze, as if embarrassed to be caught in such a private moment. "That song," Daniel said, his voice much softer, more hesitant than he intended. He gestured vaguely. "The one you were humming. You sing in Dutch." Emma's blush deepened. She looked down at the cloth in her hands, twisting it nervously. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. Then, as if gathering a small ounce of courage, she lifted her eyes to meet his, a flicker of shy pride in their depths. I speak and sing in 9 languages, sir." 9 languages. The words hung in the air. Daniel looked at her, truly looked at her, perhaps for the first time. He saw past the simple uniform, past the role she played in the vast machinery of his company. He saw a hint of the passion, the depth he'd sensed in the voice at the cafe. That's quite remarkable, Miss Carter," he said, a genuine note of intrigue in his voice. Would you mind stepping into my office for a moment? When you have a break, of course. I'd like to hear a little more about that, if you're willing." Emma's heart felt like it was going to beat out of her chest. The CEO, inviting her to his office. "Yes, sir." "Of course, sir," she managed, her voice still trembling slightly. A short while later, standing in Daniel's enormous office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking panorama of the city, Emma felt incredibly small and out of place. The plush carpet, the expensive art on the walls, the sheer scale of it all was intimidating. But Daniel, leaning back in his large leather chair, gestured for her to sit, his manner surprisingly gentle. He asked her about her languages, his curiosity seeming genuine. Hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence as she sensed his sincere interest, Emma began to speak. She told him how she'd taught herself, using old library books and free online resources. She explained how each language felt like discovering a new personality, a new way of expressing the world. She spoke of her love for music, how melodies and lyrics transcended borders, how singing was the way her soul spoke. She didn't mention La Chanson or that she'd seen him there. She just spoke from the heart, her shyness slowly melting away under his focused attention. Daniel listened, utterly captivated. He saw no guile in her, only a pure, unadulterated passion for her craft. He was impressed, deeply so, not just by the astonishing talent, but by the quiet dignity and earnestness with which she shared it. This was a side of Emma Carter no one at Hayes Tech, least of all him, had ever suspected. When she finished, a comfortable silence settled between them for a moment. Daniel smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "Thank you for sharing that with me, Emma. It's truly fascinating. You have a rare gift." He kept his tone polite, professional, but there was an undeniable shift in his demeanor towards her, a new level of respect, of seeing. He didn't press further about her singing, didn't mention the cafe. Soon, she was politely excused. As Emma walked out of his office, her legs feeling a little unsteady, her heart was a whirlwind of emotions. Surprise, fear, confusion, and beneath it all, a tiny, exhilarating spark of hope. The CEO of Hayes Tech knew her secret. He knew about her languages, her singing. What on earth would happen now? She replayed the conversation in her mind, his kind eyes, his genuine interest. For the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of something other than invisibility. It was a few days later, as Emma was finishing her evening shift, that Daniel approached her again. He found her in the now empty cafeteria, wiping down tables. He looked almost hesitant. "Emma," he began, a small, almost boyish smile touching his lips. "I was thinking, we have a music room here at HQ. It's on the top floor tucked away. Soundproofed. It's hardly ever used these days. I was wondering if you might be interested in, well, perhaps trying out the acoustics sometime? After everyone's gone home, of course. No pressure at all." Emma stared at him, her cleaning cloth frozen mid-swipe. "A music room? Here?" And he was inviting her? "A music room, sir?" she echoed, her voice barely audible. Yes, Daniel confirmed, his eyes crinkling at the corners. It has a rather nice grand piano and some decent recording equipment, though it's a bit dated. I thought you might enjoy it. And so their clandestine after-hours meetings began. Once the last employee had departed and the vast headquarters fell into a hushed stillness, Emma would make her way to the top floor. The music room was a surprise, spacious, elegantly furnished, with that beautiful black grand piano as its centerpiece. Daniel would already be there, sometimes idly playing a few chords. At first, their sessions were tentative, almost shy. Emma, initially intimidated, would sing songs she knew well, folk tunes and simple ballads in various languages. Daniel would listen, sometimes from across the room, sometimes leaning against the piano. He'd offer quiet suggestions, a word of encouragement. Slowly, he began to join in. His voice, though rusty from disuse, still possessed a rich, baritone warmth. They explored German lieder, poignant French chansons, passionate Italian arias, and lively Spanish coplas. Emma marveled at how quickly he picked up melodies, his ear for music clearly undiminished. In the sanctuary of that room, cocooned by music and shared secrecy, Daniel started to shed his CEO armor. He spoke of his mother, her unwavering belief in his musical talent, the crushing weight of guilt he'd carried since he stopped singing after her death. She used to say my voice was my truest self, he confessed one late evening, his fingers tracing a silent melody on the piano keys, his gaze fixed on some distant point. I felt like I buried a part of myself with her. I thought focusing on the business, on success, would fill that void, but it never quite did. Emma listened with an empathy that needed few words. She understood loss and she understood the vital need for self-expression. It's never too late to let that part of you breathe again, Daniel, she said softly, her voice filled with a sincerity that touched him deeply. Your mother's memory isn't a burden to carry, but a song to inspire you. She became his muse, her intuitive understanding of music and her sheer joy in performing slowly chipping away at the walls he'd built around his own artistic heart. Her passion was infectious, reigniting a spark in him he thought had long been extinguished. Their bond deepened, woven not just from melodies and harmonies, but from shared vulnerabilities and growing trust. In that music room, the rigid corporate hierarchy dissolved. They were not CEO and janitor. They were Daniel and Emma, two people finding solace and connection in a shared love for song. However, the corporate world has eyes and ears everywhere. Whispers began to ripple through the usually sterile office environment. Have you noticed Mr. Hayes is staying very late these days? And always heads towards the top floor. Someone in security mentioned the lights in the old music room are on after hours. Then, more pointedly, after someone spotted them sharing a brief, hushed conversation near the elevators, I saw him talking to that cleaner. Emma, isn't it? They looked friendly. And inevitably, from the more cynical corners, a cleaner? Really? Can't believe he's with her. What could he possibly see in someone like that? The comments, sometimes overheard by Emma in passing, were like tiny pinpricks, reminding her of the chasm between their worlds. One particularly late evening, they were engrossed in rehearsing a dramatic, emotionally charged Italian duet. The music swelled around them, a passionate declaration of love and longing. They stood close, facing each other, their voices intertwining, their eyes locked. The air in the room grew thick, charged with an unspoken energy that transcended the music. As the final, powerful notes faded into silence, the resonance of the piano still vibrating in the air, Daniel slowly reached out, his fingers gently brushing her cheek. He leaned in, his gaze searching hers. And then he kissed her. It was a kiss that started with hesitant tenderness, a question asked and answered in the soft touch of their lips. Then it deepened, filled with all the unspoken emotions, the shared melodies, the months of growing affection. Emma's heart soared, a wild, exhilarating flight. She kissed him back, her hands finding their way to his shoulders, the world outside the music room ceasing to exist. For those precious moments, there were no whispers, no judgments, no differences in status or background. There was only the lingering echo of the song and this breathtaking, undeniable connection. But as they slowly drew apart, breathless, reality came rushing back in a cold wave. Emma's joy was tinged with a sudden, sharp fear. Thrilled as she was, a knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. She knew with a chilling certainty what this could mean. The office gossip would explode. People like Victoria would be merciless. They wouldn't just attack her, they would try to destroy her reputation, and perhaps even Daniel's, by painting her as some sort of calculating opportunist. The thought terrified her. We're so glad you're sharing this story with us. We're curious, where are you watching from today? Drop a comment below and let us know. And while you're at it, have you ever faced unfair comments or judgments at your workplace, perhaps because of your job, your background, or just for being different? It takes courage to rise above it. We love hearing your stories and experiences, so please share if you feel comfortable. Victoria, the meticulously groomed receptionist, was deliberately working late. She had orchestrated a minor crisis with the evening courier service, all for the chance of a casual, yet hopefully meaningful encounter with Daniel Hayes. She considered him her territory, her ultimate career and personal aspiration. As she made a strategic pass by the executive wing, ostensibly to check on a faulty sensor, she noticed a soft light emanating from under the door of the rarely used music room. Voices, then music, drifted out. Curiosity tinged with suspicion compelled her to pause. She leaned closer, pressing her ear to the heavy wood, then found a tiny, almost invisible crack where the door met the frame. What she saw made her blood boil, then turned to ice. Daniel Hayes, the brilliant, sought-after CEO, her Daniel, was kissing Emma Carter. Emma, the janitor, the quiet, mousy cleaner with her exotic looks that Victoria had always secretly, resentfully, found vaguely threatening. The one who hummed those strange, foreign tunes. Fury, acrid and potent, surged through Victoria. How dare she? This was an affront, an impossibility. She's manipulating him. Victoria seethed silently, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her palms. It's so obvious. Look at her background. She's a nobody, a nothing. She's probably feeding him some sob story, using those big innocent eyes to trap him. This is a disgrace to the company and to him. Victoria's mind, already adept at office politics and subtle sabotage, began to spin a web. The very next morning, Victoria requested an urgent, private meeting with Mr. Carlton, a senior vice president known for his iron-fisted management style, his obsession with corporate image, and his complete lack of tolerance for anything that might tarnish the Hayes Tech brand. Mr. Carlton, Victoria began, her voice a carefully calibrated blend of distress and loyal concern. I feel it's my duty to report something deeply troubling. It concerns Mr. Hayes and one of the cleaning staff and Emma Carter. She then proceeded to paint a detailed, venomous picture of Emma as a cunning, manipulative woman who was clearly using her feminine wiles to ensnare the CEO, implying that Emma was a gold digger who posed a threat to Daniel's judgment and, by extension, the company's stability. She's clearly not of his caliber, sir. This sort of entanglement, it looks terrible. What will our shareholders think? Within a matter of days, the trap was sprung. A highly valuable diamond necklace belonging to the wife of a visiting dignitary who had used a VIP guest suite was reported missing. The suite had been cleaned the previous day, and records showed Emma had been the janitor assigned to that section. Emma was in the staff break room having a quick cup of tea before her shift ended when she was abruptly summoned to Mr. Carlton's imposing office. Daniel was already there, his face etched with a grim, unreadable expression. Several other stern-faced board members were present. Miss Carter, Mr. Carlton began, his voice devoid of warmth, his eyes like chips of flint. A very serious accusation has been made. A theft has occurred in the VIP suite you cleaned yesterday. He gestured to a large monitor, and a short, grainy security video began to play. It showed a figure roughly Emma's height and build, filmed from behind and at a distance, lingering near the VIP suite. Another clip, from a different camera, showed this same shadowy figure furtively slipping a small, shiny object into a locker in the staff changing room. Emma's locker number was briefly, damningly visible. My locker? Emma whispered, her blood turning to ice. Her mind reeled. This couldn't be happening. Let's go and see, shall we? Mr. Carlton said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Flanked by security, they marched to the staff changing rooms. Emma's hands were trembling so violently she could barely work the combination. When the locker door swung open, Mr. Carlton reached inside, rummaged beneath her neatly folded spare uniform, and triumphantly pulled out the missing diamond necklace. It glittered malevolently under the harsh fluorescent lights. Emma gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. No. I didn't do this. I swear. I've never seen that before in my life. Someone must have put it there. Her pleas were desperate, her eyes wide with terror and disbelief. The board members exchanged knowing, grim glances. The rumors about Daniel and this janitor had already made them deeply uncomfortable. This apparent theft was the final straw. Daniel, one of them said sternly, you must terminate her employment immediately. This is a clear breach of conduct and a potential PR nightmare. The company's reputation is paramount. Daniel looked from the cold, accusing faces of the board members to Emma's tear-streaked, terrified face. The evidence seemed irrefutable. His mind was a turmoil of doubt and a sickening sense of betrayal. Could he have been so wrong about her? Yet, deep down, a small, persistent voice whispered that the Emma he had come to know in the music room, the woman with the soulful voice and honest eyes, was incapable of such a deceitful act. But the pressure was immense. News of the accusation and the irrefutable evidence spread through Hayes Tech like a virus. As Emma, dazed and weeping, was escorted from Mr. Carlton's office complex, a crowd of employees had already gathered in the main corridor. Curiosity, shock, and a disturbing undercurrent of malicious glee rippled through them. Victoria stood at the very front, her expression a mask of faux sympathy that barely concealed a triumphant smirk. "Thief!" someone from the back yelled. "Look at her, pretending to cry," another jeered. "Serves her right, trying to climb the corporate ladder on her back," a vicious voice added. The taunts, the cruel laughter, the pointing fingers rained down on Emma. She felt stripped bare, her dignity torn to shreds in a horrifying public spectacle. Overwhelmed by shame, devastation, and a profound sense of injustice, she could only bow her head, tears of humiliation streaming down her face as she was led away. Daniel watched Emma's retreating figure, small and defeated, as she was escorted out. The cacophony of his staff's jeers and judgmental pronouncements echoed in his ears, leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. The board was insistent, their voices a chorus of condemnation and demands for swift action. Yet, amidst the uproar, the image of Emma's tear-filled, innocent eyes burned into his mind. The Emma who sang with such raw emotion, who spoke of languages as bridges between souls, could she truly be a common thief? Something felt profoundly, terribly wrong. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than met the eye. He had to know the truth. His decision was swift. He would conduct his own investigation, discreetly and thoroughly. His first port of call that very evening was Le Chanson. The cafe was quiet, only a few patrons lingering over coffee. He found Mrs. Dubois, the kind-faced elderly owner, wiping down the counter. He introduced himself and explained carefully that he was making some inquiries about Emma Carter's character. Emma. Mrs. Dubois's warm eyes crinkled at the corners as she smiled fondly. "Ah, that child is the soul of this little place. As gentle and honest as the day is long." "Steal? Emma?" "Monsieur Hayes, that girl once found a wallet here, absolutely stuffed with cash. She could have easily pocketed it. No one would have known. Instead, she waited 3 hours after her shift, refusing to leave until the owner, a very distressed tourist, finally returned. She wouldn't even accept a reward. No, Emma Carter is not a thief. She has more integrity in her little finger than many people I've known in my long life." Daniel thanked Mrs. Dubois, her words a comforting balm to his own troubled thoughts, reinforcing his gut feeling. The next day, he began to meticulously review employee schedules and access logs for the day of the alleged theft. He discreetly interviewed staff members who worked on the same floor as the VIP suite, asking seemingly casual questions about what they had seen or heard. He listened intently, his analytical mind sifting through their responses, noting subtle inconsistencies, glances averted, moments of hesitation. The timeline presented by Mr. Carlton felt increasingly flimsy. Then his tech expertise kicked in. The security footage they had been shown, it was too neat, too conveniently damning. He bypassed the edited clips provided by Carlton's office and accessed Hayes Tech's full, raw CCTV server archives. It took hours, sifting through footage from dozens of cameras, cross-referencing timestamps. His eyes grew tired, his frustration mounted. And then he found it. A camera angle from a little-used maintenance corridor, one that security likely overlooked in their initial sweep. The footage was clear, Victoria, her face unmistakable, looking around furtively before quickly ducking into the staff locker room area around the time the necklace would have been planted. Minutes later, another camera, this one overlooking a different section of the VIP floor, showed a junior IT technician, known to be friendly with Victoria and often eager to please her, fiddling with the primary camera near the VIP suite. The camera feed cut out for precisely 90 seconds, logged as a minor network glitch. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Meanwhile, Emma, her spirit utterly broken, sat in her tiny, sparsely furnished apartment. Her few belongings were scattered around her as she tearfully packed them into a worn suitcase and a couple of cardboard boxes. Her termination letter, cold and impersonal, lay on the small table. Her name was ruined, her dreams shattered. There was nothing left for her at Hayes Tech, nothing left for her in the city that had promised so much and delivered such crushing disappointment. She carefully folded the simple dress she sometimes wore to sing at Le Chanson, a tear splashing onto the fabric. That life, too, felt over. Just as she was struggling to close the clasp on the overstuffed suitcase, a frantic, insistent knocking echoed through her small apartment. Her heart lurched. Who could it be? With trepidation, she opened the door. It was Daniel. He looked disheveled, his tie loosened, his hair slightly mussed, but his eyes were blazing with the fierce, protective light she had never seen before. "Emma, don't go," he said, his voice breathless, urgent. He stepped inside, his large frame seeming to fill her tiny living space. I know you didn't do it. I've been looking into it all day. I found proof. Victoria framed you. She planted the necklace. Emma stared at him, her tear-filled eyes wide with disbelief. The words barely registered through the fog of her despair. You believe me? She finally choked out, her voice trembling. Yes, Emma. I believe you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides and gently took her by the shoulders. His gaze was steady, unwavering. I should never have doubted you. Please, you have to trust me. We're going to fix this. I promise. The dam of her composure finally broke. With a choked sob, she collapsed into his arms, the suitcase forgotten. He held her tightly, stroking her hair, murmuring words of comfort and reassurance as she wept out all the pain, the fear, and the humiliation of the past few days. In his embrace, for the first time since the nightmare began, a tiny, fragile seed of hope began to take root in her shattered heart. He believed her. He was going to fight for her. The following morning, Daniel Hayes, armed with a USB stick containing the damning footage and a meticulously prepared dossier, strode into the emergency board meeting he had called. Mr. Carlton and the other board members looked surprised, then impatient. Daniel, we've already settled the matter of Ms. Carter, Carlton began stiffly. No, we haven't, Daniel cut in, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable edge of steel. But we're about to. He connected the USB stick to the main screen. For the next 20 minutes, he laid out the irrefutable evidence. The unedited CCTV footage clearly showing Victoria's furtive actions near Emma's locker, the time-stamped logs of the conveniently disabled camera near the VIP suite. The technician's nervous admission, obtained late the previous night, of being asked by Victoria to create a brief diversion, and finally, Mrs. Du Bois's heartfelt testimony about Emma's unwavering honesty. The conspiracy, born of Victoria's bitter jealousy and ambition, unraveled before their stunned eyes. Mr. Carlton's face went from indignant to pale, then to a deep, mottled red as the full extent of the deception became clear. The only crime committed here, Daniel concluded, his gaze sweeping across the now silent and visibly uncomfortable board members, was the malicious framing of an innocent woman. And this company nearly became an accomplice. The outcome was swift and decisive. By midday, a carefully worded but unequivocal public company memo was emailed to every single employee at Hayes Tech. It officially and completely exonerated Emma Carter of all accusations, offered a profound and sincere apology for the grievous error and the distress caused to her, and announced a full, transparent internal review of the security protocols and, more pointedly, the individuals involved in the mismanagement of the initial investigation. Later that afternoon, Daniel called an impromptu all-hands meeting in the company's expansive main auditorium. The room was packed to capacity, a palpable buzz of nervous anticipation, speculation, and guilt hanging heavy in the air. Daniel stood alone on the stage, his presence commanding. As you are all now aware from the memo, he began, his voice amplified, resonating through the silent hall, a grave injustice was done to one of our colleagues, Ms. Emma Carter. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in, his eyes scanning the sea of faces. An injustice fueled by malice and deceit. Today we begin to right that wrong, not just with apologies, but with actions. Then he made an announcement that sent an audible gasp rippling through the entire auditorium. To not only celebrate truth and integrity but also to recognize an extraordinary and hidden talent among us, I am immensely proud to announce that Ms. Emma Carter will be the special guest performer at our annual company gala next week. A wave of stunned murmurs swept the room. Emma Carter, the janitor they had scorned and accused, performing at the most prestigious company event of the year? The night of the gala arrived. Backstage, Emma felt a tremor of nerves, but also a newfound sense of calm determination. Daniel had been incredibly supportive, reassuring her every step of the way. She was no longer dressed in her drab work uniform. Instead, she wore a simple yet breathtakingly elegant deep sapphire gown, a gift from Daniel that shimmered under the ambient light, its color enhancing her light brown skin. Her hair was styled in soft waves and a touch of makeup highlighted her naturally beautiful features. When her name was announced and she stepped onto the brightly lit stage, a hush fell over the hundreds of elegantly dressed employees. Many stared, trying to reconcile this poised, radiant woman with the quiet, unassuming janitor they thought they knew. Then she began to sing. She had chosen an iconic, emotionally resonant ballad, one known for its soaring melody and powerful lyrics about truth and resilience. But Emma added her own unique touch. She started in English, her voice clear and pure, then seamlessly transitioned into French, then Spanish, her tone shifting with the language, each verse imbued with a different emotional color. She continued, weaving in phrases in Japanese, then a verse in soulful Hindi, her voice growing in power and passion, filling every corner of the grand ballroom. The audience was utterly mesmerized. They were witnessing not just a beautiful performance, but a profound transformation. This wasn't just the cleaner, this was an artist, a captivating presence, her voice a conduit for pure emotion. The same girl they had mocked was now holding them spellbound. As the final, soaring note faded, an absolute silence hung in the air for a beat, then the room erupted. The applause was thunderous, a genuine, overwhelming standing ovation. Tears welled in Emma's eyes, but this time, they were tears of joy, of vindication, of overwhelming gratitude. Then, to the astonishment of everyone present, Daniel Hayes himself walked onto the stage, a microphone in his hand, a look of immense pride and profound affection on his face as he looked at Emma. He turned to the audience. Emma reminded me, and I hope all of us, that true worth and talent can be found in the most unexpected places, and that we should never judge a book by its cover, or a person by their job title. He then turned back to Emma, his smile warm and genuine. "May I?" he asked softly. She nodded, her own smile radiant. He began to sing the opening lines of a well-known, uplifting duet. Emma joined in, their voices blending in perfect harmony, a public declaration of their shared journey, their mutual respect, and the beautiful music they created together. Emma Carter, once invisible, once scorned and falsely accused, was now the celebrated, admired star of Hayes Tech. In the days that followed, Victoria Bellwether and a few of her closest, now very nervous, co-conspirators in the smear campaign were quietly but firmly dismissed from the company, their careers at Hayes Tech over. Their reputations irrevocably tarnished by their own cruel actions. Several months drifted by, like soft, harmonious notes in a changing melody. The atmosphere at Hayes Tech had subtly shifted. There was a greater sense of awareness, perhaps even a touch more humility, among the staff. And Emma Carter was no longer a shadow pushing a cleaning cart. She now occupied a modest but bright office on the third floor, the plaque on her door reading, "Emma Carter, Corporate Cultural Liaison." Her role, a new position created by Daniel, was to foster greater understanding and appreciation for different cultures within the company. She organized lunchtime language tasters, curated playlists of international music for the company's intranet, and gave small, engaging presentations on cultural nuances, often using music as her bridge. The employees who had once whispered cruelly about her now greeted her with genuine respect, some even shyly asking her for song recommendations or tips on learning a new language. Daniel Hayes, too, was a man transformed. The CEO was still brilliant, still driven, but a certain lightness had returned to him, a creative spark reignited. Encouraged and constantly inspired by Emma, he had tentatively begun working on a new album of his own original songs. The music room was once again filled with his voice, no longer rusty but full of renewed passion and depth. His mother's dream for him was finally, beautifully, taking flight, not as a burden of past regret, but as a joyful expression of his true self, a journey made infinitely sweeter by having Emma by his side. Their relationship, once a secret whispered in hushed tones, was now an open, accepted part of their lives. They were dating, their affection for each other evident in shared smiles and easy camaraderie. They were often seen sharing a simple lunch in the company cafeteria, their quiet laughter a pleasant sound, or leaving together at the end of the day, their conversations flowing easily. The initial awkwardness from other employees had faded, replaced by a genuine warmth and happiness for the couple who had, in their own way, brought a new kind of harmony to Hayes Tech. One late afternoon, as the city lights began to twinkle outside the panoramic windows, they found themselves back in the music room. It was their sanctuary, their special place. Daniel sat at the grand piano, his fingers dancing over the keys, coaxing out a new, tender melody he'd been working on. Emma stood beside him, leaning lightly against the piano, humming softly along, her presence a comforting anchor. She rested her hand gently on his shoulder. He looked up from the keys, his gaze meeting hers. His eyes, clear and bright, were filled with a love so profound it needed no words. She smiled back, a soft, radiant smile that mirrored his affection, a smile that spoke of shared dreams, overcome obstacles, and a future filled with promise. The melody he played was gentle, hopeful, a sweet, lyrical tune that seemed to encapsulate their journey. He continued to play, and she continued to hum, their hearts beating in time with the music. The final shot lingered on their loving glance, a silent promise of many more songs to be shared, before slowly fading to black. If you love seeing underdogs triumph and find their well-deserved happiness, there are more uplifting stories just like this one waiting for you. Be sure to check out the playlist in the comments below for more tales that will inspire and warm your heart.